Right now, somewhere, a person is eating a steak because of something a machine said about a bone. It might be you. Not a recent bone, a Neanderthal one. It's collagen fed into a machine that weighs atoms. The number that came back said meat. Almost nothing but meat. More meat than a wolf eats. More than a lion. That number built the caveman who lives in your head. It built the diet books and the gym advice and the whole comfortable story that underneath the clothes, you're a predator. The bone was measured correctly. The story was still wrong. Here's how anyone claims to know what was eaten 40,000 years ago. You are what you eat, right down to the atoms. Nitrogen comes in two weights, and the heavier one lingers in a body a little longer than the lighter one. So every step up the food chain, the ratio climbs. A plant sits low. The deer that ate the plant sits higher. The wolf that ate the deer sits higher still. Each step adds a few per mil, which is just a way of measuring a very small difference very precisely. Bone holds a protein scaffold called collagen, and collagen can survive tens of thousands of years in a cold cave. Grind it up, read the nitrogen, count the steps. You can place a dead animal on the food chain without ever seeing a single meal. It's a genuinely beautiful piece of science. In 2019, a study in the journal PNAS ran the sharpest version of that test anyone had managed, measuring individual amino acids instead of the bone as a whole. Two Neanderthals from two French caves. One came back at a trophic position of 2.9, which is just its rung on that ladder, a pure carnivore. The second one came back at 3.2, which put it above the actual carnivores buried in the same ground. And the authors didn't hand-wave. They walked through every other explanation and knocked them down one at a time. Cooking, fermenting, mammoth meat, freshwater fish, mushrooms. None of it was needed. The simplest reading of the number was meat, and a lot of it. And if that number was all you had in front of you, you would have read it the same way. So that seems settled. Except the whole ladder only works if one thing moves that number. In 2025, a study in Science Advances went looking for what else does. They measured what happens to the nitrogen inside muscle as it putrefies, the way stored meat putrefies when it isn't eaten fresh. The muscle barely moved at all. Then they measured the maggots, 43 per mil at the high end. There's no animal alive with a diet rich enough to put 43 per mil into your bones. No predator on Earth eats that high. But a meal can get you there, and the record on this isn't thin at all. People stored meat. Meat rots. The larvae arrive, and across the record of people's living in cold places, eating that meat with the larvae still in it was ordinary. Which means the signal that made Neanderthals look like super predators might not be more meat. It might be older meat. And there's a harder limit sitting underneath all of this. A human being physically can't eat like a lion. Push past roughly 300 grams of protein in a day, and your liver can't clear the nitrogen fast enough. Hold that for 1 or 2 weeks, and you get sick in a specific and dangerous way. The old explorers had a name for it. They called it rabbit starvation, and it can turn lethal inside 2 weeks. So picture a Neanderthal eating the absolute maximum a body will tolerate. A lion lives at several times that, every day of its life. So the bones were saying hypercarnivore, and the body was saying, that's not possible. Something had to give. In 2024, in Nature, Ecology, and Evolution, a team ran zinc, strontium, sulfur, and amino acid tests on the remains from one site. The site is in Morocco, and it's called Taforalt. The people buried there lived about 15,000 years ago, thousands of years before anyone farmed anything. The team ran the old nitrogen test, and then they ran zinc from tooth enamel, and strontium, and sulfur, and individual amino acids. The gap between those humans and the plant-eating animals around them was 2.5 per mil. This is the number that should start rearranging the picture in your head. Hold that against a site where people really did live on animals. At Oasa, that same gap is 10.8, 2.5. The paper's own estimate is that roughly half their food was plants. Half. Before agriculture existed anywhere on Earth. And when they measured the red foxes from the same cave, the foxes came out more carnivorous than the people did. Read that again, because it is the opposite of everything you were told. There's a reason the old number always ran high. Collagen is protein. It only records protein. Fat leaves no mark on it, and starch leaves no mark on it, and fat and starch are most of what a plant actually gives you. A person could eat tubers every day of their life, and the bone would shrug and report the meat. The Taforalt team point to work finding that the standard reading overestimates animal protein by 60 to 80%. Not slightly off by more than half. Then there's the other thing, the one you can see just by looking at a dig. A rib lasts 3 million years. A tuber lasts about a week. Stone tools survive, and stone tools are the ones used on carcasses. So the record doesn't just lean toward meat, it's built almost entirely out of the parts of a meal that refuse to decay. When people go looking with methods that don't depend on that, they keep finding plants. A 2025 paper in PNAS found starch clinging to stone tools from 780,000 years ago. Charred plant food from Shanidar Cave, 70,000 years old, pulses that had been pounded and cooked. Neanderthal dental plaque with cooked starch still stuck in it. At Shanidar, there's a detail that should bother anyone. The pounded food survived. The grinding stones didn't. That food only lasted 70,000 years because it burned. Now here's where an honest version of this has to slow down. None of this makes them vegetarians. The Taforalt paper says so directly. Neanderthals in Ice Age Europe were eating animals, and the isotopes say so clearly. And the strongest objection to all of it still stands. Finding a starch grain in a dead person's teeth proves they ate a plant. It doesn't tell you whether that plant was a quarter of their diet or 1/100th of it. Detection isn't proportion. A single meal and a lifetime staple leave the same mark, and nobody has solved that. The researchers arguing for a meat-heavy past aren't denying plants were eaten. They're arguing about how much and about when it changed. That argument isn't finished. But something did change, and it was never the past. It was the ruler. For decades, the caveman in your head was a top predator because one number in bone collagen said so, and that number leaned. It leaned toward the only food that leaves a clear signature. It leaned away from everything soft enough to rot. And almost nobody checked which way it was leaning, because the picture it produced was a picture we liked. Those people can't correct us. They left teeth and bone and a faint chemistry we're still learning to read. And everything else about them went into the ground and stayed there. Every meal, every taste they had, every ordinary evening of being alive. So we took the part that happened to survive and we called it who they were. And you're still eating like it.